Hey, welcome back to Tech Tip Tuesday. Today I'm going to be talking about maintaining consistency in your quilt patterns, but before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about why consistency is important. So first of all, it helps with your branding, right? Your brand is the combination of look and feel, visual and graphic elements that are going to make your pattern specifically and everything that you put out through your company look recognizable, right? And that's a good thing because that's all going to assist with your marketing. It's also going to make your pattern feel more familiar to your reader, and that's a good thing because familiar things are not intimidating, right? They're comfortable. It's just a fact of human nature. And so if your patterns feel comfortable to your reader and they feel familiar, your reader is more likely to come back for more and more because they're not challenging, they're not overwhelming. There's nothing worse than kind of opening a quilt pattern and everything looking foreign, the formatting looking weird, and it just becomes even more overwhelming as a result of that. So this consistency between pattern to pattern is going to make your patterns feel really familiar and really comfortable and not overwhelming to your reader, which is a very good thing. Lastly, this is going to help you write faster because there's going to be common elements between all of your patterns, which means you have to make less decisions when you're writing. And the fewer decisions you have to make, the faster you can get the thing done. So how do you actually achieve this? Well, first of all, you want to create a template file. Now, this is not necessarily like a whole file or a special type of file that is a template file, although you can certainly get into that if you want to. But basically, this is just a starting file that contains all of your graphics elements, all of your layout elements that you really like. And you're just going to copy that file every single time you start a new pattern rather than from starting from scratch, so that all of the things that don't need to change are already there and you don't have to touch them. And so every single pattern is going to look similar. You just change out, your steps and your instructions and your graphics accordingly. Now, along those lines, you can also create template text in addition to your template file. And this is just steps for common elements, flying geese, half square triangles, things like that you use a lot, written out in the way that you like it. And you have that text to just copy and paste into whatever pattern you have so that you know every single time you write a pattern, you're describing that process the exact same way. Again, that adds to that familiarity and approachability of your pattern. It also makes things a lot quicker because a lot of times quilt patterns, we're just taking all of these standard shapes and putting them together in different ways. So if you have all of this text written out already, all you have to do is kind of copy and paste it in, rearrange it. It makes writing the pattern super fast. Now, along those lines, we also want to make sure that we have consistent images. And this includes both photos, so cover photos and things like that, but also your diagrams. So along with that template text file, you can have graphics in there that are just kind of standard graphics for, again, those common shapes that we're using, half square triangles, flying geese, things along those lines. Now, it's helpful to have that in your text file, but those are going to be images. And of course, you're going to need to update colors, textures, things like that to go along with the pattern that you're working in. So along with that kind of template pattern file, you want to have a template graphics file. And that's going to contain basically just example graphics of what your graphics look like in your pattern. This could be, a previous pattern that you like and use, and you just copy that file every time you start a new pattern so that you can keep the same look and feel and formatting for all of those graphics. Or it can be a file that just contains a bunch of these base graphics, and then you just delete out what you don't need and add the pieces that you need to customize it to the pattern that you're working on. But the idea being is that you're never starting from scratch when you start a pattern. You're just going to grab that graphics file, paste it into the folder you're working in, and then start modifying it to the things that you need. Now, as far as photos go, we're mainly talking about the cover photo here, although sometimes people also include some different lifestyle shots inside their pattern or on the back of their pattern, which is totally fine too. But with those, you want to kind of use similar lighting, similar color saturation, similar backgrounds to kind of make them feel a little bit more familiar and consistent across your patterns. So what you're seeing is the cover of one of my patterns, Wonky Woven. And you can see I've kind of got very, very saturated, cool colors in my photos. This is characteristic of all the quilts that I work with. They also tend to be pretty saturated, right? I'm going to get those warm colors to kind of pop out. And then I will always photograph, usually on some sort of gray backdrop, or occasionally I'll just kind of put some neutral landscaping in the background, and that works pretty well for me. But all of my cover quilt photos are going to look pretty similar to that kind of shot. Now, this is also super handy when you happen to be taking cover quilt photos because it means you can take the quilts that you're trying to photograph to the exact same spot or to similar spots every single time. You know exactly what you're looking for, and you're basically taking the same set of shots each time. It makes that process go way quicker. You don't have to work so hard to get like that perfect cover shot, which is something that I think produces a lot of anxiety for a lot of people. Trying to get the the perfect cover shot. If you're not a professional photographer, it can be really difficult, but knowing that you're looking for the exact same things and the exact same kind of shots in order to maintain consistency each time does make that process easier and faster. Okay, so now that we've talked about how to achieve consistency, let's talk about some situations where it's okay to deviate from this, because by and large, you don't want to deviate, right? That's the whole purpose, is that you need to maintain all of these common elements or else you don't have consistency with your quilt patterns. But there's a couple of situations where it's actually okay to deviate and where you might want to. The first is for holiday branding. If you happen to be writing like a holiday themed quilt pattern, a lot of times the branding colors that you're working with just don't work with kind of the traditional Christmas colors, right? Reds, greens, golds, things like that. That's certainly true of my branding colors. Now, I haven't written a Christmas pattern myself, but if I were, this kind of branding that you see on the side with all of these bright, clean colors, they're probably not going to work with a Christmas pattern very well. So that's one situation where it might be okay to kind of deviate from your typical branding colors and things like that. So for instance, I might change my header to a gold color or a silver or something like that. That would look a little bit more natural with a Christmas theme. I might also do like a holiday version of my logo or something along those lines. You might add holly or some sort of Christmassy branding element graphic to your quilt pattern, and that's totally fine. Just make a basically holiday version of your typical branding, and then use that for every holiday pattern that you make, right? So you don't want to come up with like a different branding style for every single holiday pattern you write. You want to kind of just make one or two variations that kind of go with those holiday colors that you're working with, and then stick to that for every single holiday pattern that you're doing. But that's one good instance where sticking with the typical things that you have in your quilt pattern, all of those graphic elements and colors, just isn't going to work very well. Collaborations are another great instance where it's okay to deviate, and that's usually because you're working with another designer, and so you want to come up with something that kind of incorporates elements from both of your branding elements and style. And that's okay because it's neither their pattern or your pattern, it's a collaboration. So that's another great instance where it's okay to deviate from kind of the consistent elements of your patterns. The final one here is block of the month patterns, and this is because a lot of times these are doled out in installments, and that's going to be completely different for the most part from a typical complete pattern document that you would have. So if you're doing print patterns, right, these installments are not going to have front and back covers, right? They're basically going to be chapters within the inside of it. You're doling out individually, and sometimes you add a cover page to that just to make it look a little bit more complete. But this is a great instance where it's okay to kind of deviate from those branding elements. But again, with the holiday theme here, you want to kind of establish a template for a block of the month. And then for every block of the month you do, you want to use that same template over and over again to make sure that your patterns are consistent block of the month to block of the month. Does that make sense? Alrighty, that's all I've got for you today. I hope some of these tips help you. Maintaining consistency in your patterns is a really great way to kind of up that professionality of your patterns and make sure that everybody kind of takes you a little bit more seriously in your pattern design business. So here are some quick tips to help you do that. Alrighty, that's all I've got for today. If you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you next time for Tech Tip Tuesday. See ya.